Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of Take Me Back, the interviews. Today we are turning the tables on a well-known local filmmaker. He's been making films for a very long time. And he, in fact, is not the director today. He is going to be interviewed. We're so happy to have him. This is somebody I've known almost 40 years, and I am delighted to have you here, Charlie Brown.
And I'm delighted to be here.
So I'm going to ask you some questions I've never asked you before. And then we'll get on to the stories that we kind of know well and often laugh together over that happened in the Valley. I have always called you Charlie. I don't know what your full name is.
Charles Q. Brown.
And what is the Q?
That separates the Charles from the Brown.
Is it like Quentin or something?
It's just Q.
Seriously?
Yeah,
They
seriously,
just gave you an initial.
that's it.
And one of the least used letters, too. A Q.
Just the Q.
It's intriguing.
Yes. That's why I used it.
I know, and we'll talk about it later, the story of how you wound up in the Valley, and it was life-changing. You made a life-changing decision to do so. Mm-hmm. But we've never talked about your family and where you grew up. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me a little bit about them?
Sure. So I had my mother and my father, and I had two brothers, Edward and Harry. And
where were you in that lineup?
I was the baby of the family.
Oh, I could have called that one.
Yeah. And we were just a typical American family, and
in where?
in Philadelphia. And we moved around Philadelphia. We ended up in I can't remember the name of the place, but it was a nice 2-bedroom condominium. But by that time, I had moved to Vermont, which sort of surprised a lot of people.
So you lived in the city of Philadelphia?
Till I was 28.
And so you came here in 1965. What was it like to grow up in Philadelphia back then? What was the city like?
It was very nice. It was probably one of the smallest big cities, because there's all these neighborhoods, and each neighborhood was like an entity unto itself. So I grew up with a bunch of kids about my age, and there was an alley that ran down the middle. I mean, these are a bunch of houses here and a bunch of houses here, and there was an alley that was in the middle. So there was I'm guessing about 14 or 15 kids that were up and around my age, and we used to play basketball there. So like the alley was here, and then there was a sort of a small downgrade into our garage. So when we were playing basketball, you'd come across the driveway and then down into the thing. Our basket was a bunch of wires that ran across the thing, so you had to get it in between the wires, and there were 2 pipes that came down this way. So that's how you scored a basket.
So you were shaping your game around what was there.
Yeah.
It was just the city, and you were using what was there.
We used to play kick the ball around the block.
Uh-huh.
You'd get the ball and you start kicking it, and then you'd go around the block and come down the street. And then we'd play time. And
Stickball? Did you play stickball?
We played stickball.
Yeah.
Actually, we played with a pink ball, and that was also on our basketball court. And so if it went above the wires, it was a home run. If it went down through the wires, it was a triple. Everything else was kind of a single. And there was a bunch of steps outside, and if you got the right time, you could move up a step, and whoever got to the top step won.
Right.
And we'd have boys and girls. We let the girls play, or else they let us play.
I'm trying to visualize. I was born in 1955, and in track houses that were built for veterans of World War II. Uh-huh. My father was a war hero, quite frankly. He was.
He was a what?
A war hero.
Really?
Yes, in the South Pacific.
Wow.
And the most impactful part of being in that neighborhood to me was that all the grandparents had accents,
Really.
right? And they had all come through Ellis Island,
Yeah.
including mine. So I'm curious about, you were born in what year?
1935.
So 1935 in Philadelphia, was there a lot of ethnicity? Were there a lot of immigrants?
Oh yeah, there was quite a bit of immigrants. In fact, I think my father was an immigrant, and maybe my mother, and our grandmother lived with us in our house, and she had to be in her 80s or 90s, and she was this little old Jewish lady, and she would sort of sit by the heater, or actually the oven. And I can hear her now saying, "Jack came home tonight," and every day.
So where was she from?
Somewhere in Europe, I'm not quite sure, and I'm not sure where my father was actually from, but I just don't really know. My older brother Harry was a scoutmaster and football player. And my brother Eddie was a beautiful guy, just a lovely human being who turned to guys instead of girls when he was about 15 or 16 years old. And I remember when he came out of the closet, no one ever heard of.
Not back then. Nobody talked about it.
Nobody. And he would, he probably was gay from the time he started, about 15 or 16 years old. And I never heard of a gay person in my life.
No, I believe you entirely.
But it didn't affect me at all. It wasn't like I went, "Oh, my brother's a gay guy." I didn't know what gay guys did or anything like that. Eventually, he ended up marrying a guy, and as a matter of fact, it wasn't until very late in life that he ended up, marrying another guy, and they had one of the strongest relationships I have ever seen in my life. I mean, you talk about two guys being in love. It was unbelievable. And he, at the later part of his life, when he was about 88, 89, he was pretty sick. And Bob used to go over to the hospital at 9 o'clock in the morning and stay there till 5 o'clock at night. And at most, if my brother was talking at all, he would maybe say one word, and the rest of the time he would be silent or whatever. But Bob would just sit there and keep him company all day.
It's so beautiful. It's bringing tears to my eyes.
It was unbelievable.
We should all have a love like that.
Yeah.
I want to remind the younger listeners and viewers that it was a very different world for us.
Oh, God.
Very different. I also, I grew up in two different towns, and both were what I think of in the shadow of the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. So I never heard anybody admit that they had any kind of alternative lifestyle. Mm-hmm. There had to have been people, because we know statistically that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. But they had to hide in plain sight to be safe. Yeah. And that may be shocking to folks that are young, that the world was that way. Yeah. The other thing, though, in terms of your story, Charlie, which is significant to me, the immigrant experience, and you're talking about your grandmother being an immigrant, and probably your father wasn't born in the country either.
Probably not, yeah.
I think the one unifying thing is that our grandparents sacrificed a lot to get us to the United States. Yeah. A lot. I mean, risked their lives, most of them. Mm. And so they had certain expectations. I know by the 60s, a lot of young people were kind of throwing caution to the wind. But when you were growing up, it was still extremely conservative. Yeah. And the expectation that you would go to college and be a businessman or a lawyer or a doctor, I mean, there was only a few things that we were to aspire to. Even though I'm younger than you, that still existed in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And here you are. So you fast forward you a little bit.
Yeah.
You were part of what I think of as the pivotal year that changed this valley. And I would mark that at 1965. But let's go back to when you first started falling in love with skiing. How old were you?
I think I was probably around 20 or 21, somewhere in there. Actually, a friend of mine, Richie Fredericks, said there was one Christmas, and he said there's a place we can go up in Massachusetts, and they have rooms for rent and things like that. And part of their program is that you could learn how to ski. Well, that was kind of simplified, but there was actually a rope tow in the back. So you got on the rope tow, and you may be going up 25 feet, then you get off and you'd ski down. And so I said, let me try that, and I tried it. And at the end of the day, I mean, I was just like, wow, that's great. I love it. I love it. I love it. And then there were several ski areas in the Philadelphia area.
Are there?
Huh?
I can't even picture that.
Well, actually, there were.
Skiers in Philadelphia?
Yeah, there were actually in the suburbs. You know, it was Elk Mountain, and I can't remember. There was another mountain there. And Elk Mountain was a pretty serious mountain, but nothing like Vermont, you know, but good trails and all that stuff. And we rented a house in the Poconos, a bunch of the guys, and we went up there every weekend and played.
So you were enjoying it. I mean, you were enjoying not just the skiing, but the scene.
Well, we had one guy, Paul Sweeney, and he was an electrician and a big, big Irishman. And unfortunately, we used to go down to Ocean City and Atlantic City during the weekends. Well, actually, my parents, we would go for about a week or 2 weeks or something like that. But anyway, it was a bunch of guys that all, we'd go down the 14th Street Beach, and there'd be about, guys and girls, maybe 15 or 20 of us. But anyway, we had a way to get into the water. It was like you ran from your blanket at full speed, and when you hit the water and it was safe enough, you dove headfirst into the water. And sometimes the water wasn't very high at all. Well, to make a long story short, my friend Paul Sweeney dove into the water, and I was the last guy diving in, and he was just kind of, out like this. And what had happened is he hit the bottom. When he dove too deep and hit the bottom, and he broke his neck.
Oh, my God.
So Paul was paralyzed for life, but he still worked as an electrician. He had a car that he could drive. He had a wheelchair, and he was really good at what he did. But the day that he broke his neck, I mean, we were all just, oh my God, we were humbled. We didn't know what to do for him, but we'd visit him in a hospital and stay in touch as best we could. I'm chuckling because there was one time, well, maybe more than just one time, when we had this house and there was a step and then it would go down like that. So we'd put Paul on his backside, and we'd push him, and he'd end up at the front door. That's how he got there, right? Oh my God! So I mean, you would hardly know that he was in such serious shape, but he was a great guy.
Sounds like he went on living. Yeah. He found a way to do that.
And the way I got my pension for visiting bars and rock and roll bands is at night at Summers Point. They had there was 3 streets that ran together, and this street had one bar, then there was another bar, and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon it was 10-cent beers. Oh my God. So we started dancing and 10-cent beers at 4 o'clock in the morning. In the afternoon. And then we'd be there all night. And this one band, what the heck was the name? Pete Carroll. So he'd be at this one band that it went out into the water. And when the band would take a break, he'd go out and get his motorcycle and he'd drive it down this pier into the water. Boom.
Okay. So, you painted these great portraits for us. You've got this rich city life, the way cities used to be.
Yep.
You've got you going to the shore with your family.
Yep.
Then you, as a young man,
Yep.
you're skiing in the Poconos.
Yep.
You're out at the shore enjoying the vibrant shore scene.
Oh my
So
God.
I'm having a hard time now. How do I get you to Vermont? Is there a short version of how it happened?
Yeah, well, I'm relatively short, but anyway, these friends. I was working for this firm, and they sent me down to Florida, and there was a company called Pantino, and these guys were, marketing experts and things like that. I had just come back from IBM school, where I learned about computers.
Now, fill something in for me. So you went to college
Yep.
at,
Temple University.
and then you were hired by IBM.
Yeah, actually, I was hired by this. Actually, it was the Eastern end of Janssen bathing suits, and they had a big factory and all that stuff.
Okay.
And I got this job as a marketing assistant.
So how does IBM factor into that?
I'm getting to it.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
getting to it.
Whoops.
No problem. So anyway, they wanted me to learn computers because they were putting in a computer service job where if you had a company and you wanted to put your payroll on IBM and all that stuff. So they sent me to IBM school for 2 weeks, and I sort of got the gist of it, but it was really in the early stages of computers and things like that. So some nights I used to stay in the office all night long just working on one of our problems and stuff like that. But we had a big printer that was like that big and sat up from the floor, So we'd have all these people coming in to see if they wanted to use our services and stuff like that. So somehow they fixed up the printer that when the guy put his hand on the printer would start printing, "Get your hands off of me." So there's all these executives all dressed up and stuff like that. Me sitting there and so that was, I worked there, I would guess a couple years, and then, they sent me down to Florida, and the guy that was running the facility down there knew more about IBM machines than I've ever seen anybody in my life. He used every piece of equipment and all the storage, storage of all these units and stuff like that. I mean, there was nothing that was left empty. I mean, he was a genius, and here they send me in there, and I don't know anything. So anyway, at one point, a bunch of friends of mine had a house that they rented at Sugarbush on German Flats Road. In fact, it was Mike Rocchio's house, and so they had, I guess, about 20 guys that came up. And they'd come up every weekend. But Richie and I were up here for the season, so we got to stay in this house, 7 days a week.
So you left the job in Florida?
Well, we left the job in Florida, actually, and I came up here just to ski for the weekend. And the first place I got to see was the Bluetooth. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. So it was like a Friday night, and there was like windows along this side of the Bluetooth, and then there was a stage back here, and then there was a big stone fireplace, and I was all the way in the back of the room, and I was looking out the window, and they had these ice sculptures, or that the water melted and then they froze, so they were like 7 foot tall.
Huge icicles.
Yeah, huge icicles.
Yeah.
And the fireplace was, flaming, the band was playing rock and roll music, and there were so many ladies that you could not believe it. I went, oh my God, I am in love. I am in love with this place. So anyway.
So did you stay that winter? Did you just stay?
No, actually that winter I just spent the weekend, and then I had to go back to Florida to finish this job. And one of the controller of the company down in Florida was moving to New York, and he was going to be the assistant comptroller for Revlon up in New York City. So I said, Charlie, why don't you come with us? You'll be this and this and that. I said, gee, that's not a bad idea. So I went up there with him, and I took a quick interview, and this guy said, let us think it over. I said, well, there's one exception. I said, I got to go ski bumming for this year. And I said, at the end of the year, I'll come back and we'll make a decision. He says, fine.
And that would have been 64 or 65?
It was actually more 64 than
Yeah.
it was 65. And so I finally came in to take the final. So he says to me, Charlie, he said, when the snow starts falling in December, what are you going to be thinking about? And I looked at him, and I looked out the window. I looked at him, I looked out the window. And I said, well, thank you very much. You've been very, very, good with me. I said, but when the snow starts falling in December, I'm going to be skiing. And I walked out the door. And that was the biggest decision I've ever made in my life,
Just, sure.
So my first job was washing dishes at the Inside Edge. So I went from being an executive, and this place was pretty wild because they used to have these executive meetings. There'll be 9 or 10 guys around the table, and the next thing you know, one guy comes jumping across the table. They ended up in a fist fight in the middle of the table. I'm going, gentlemen, we're trying to hold the meeting here. If you want to go fight outside. So anyway, I came to Sugar Bush. And
so I want to pause to emphasize for young people that the culture was very much like the show Mad Men. You were to aspire to an office job.
Yeah.
And you were working for Revlon. That was huge. It's still a huge company.
Oh, yeah.
But back then, man, it was huge.
Yeah.
You were probably making some pretty good money for a young man.
Absolutely. I probably right now be worth, millions of dollars because it was just the beginning, and I was in on the bottom floor and stuff like that. So
to make that choice, and again, I go back to the family pressure, the cultural pressure.
Yeah.
They must have thought you were out of your mind.
Well, my mother was a very, very, I don't know whether the word lenient or very understanding woman, and she loved it. She loved it. As a matter of fact, when I came home from ski bumming, when I went for the trip, I was wearing a crew cut, and when I got home, my hair was as long as yours. So one of the neighbors goes to my mother, and she says, Lily, he says, there's a bum outside your house. And she says, that's no bum, that's my son. That always cracks me up,
So the ski bumming part has intrigued me. But you know what, even maybe more, is the way you changed your livelihood. The way you turned toward the arts is very interesting.
I didn't even give it a thought. I mean, I had enough money in the bank. I mean, I wasn't rich or anything like that, but I had enough money to carry me along, and if I didn't like it, I could always go back to Revlon. So to tell you the truth, I never gave it a second thought. I mean, there I was washing dishes, and the waiters and waitresses were coming in. Oh, that table number 7, I hate those guys. I hate them. So little by little, I made my way into the valley, becoming friends with this person and that person and stuff like that. And so I went from dishwasher, and then Mike Rocchio hired me. He wanted me to run the show, and he'd give me a part of the business and all
And
that.
this was at the Bluetooth?
No, this was at the Inside Edge, it was called.
And where was that?
It was right across the street from Henri's. Right?
Okay.
So at the time, there was an upstairs, which was a dining room, and there was a downstairs that was a rock and roll, not a rock and roll boy, but entertainment. So I would get there, I don't know. Well, we served lunch and dinner, so I had lots of things to do. And then after dinner, we would close the upstairs and we'd open the downstairs. So essentially, I was there from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2, 3 o'clock the next morning. And we had a group called the Thrice Mellow One, and there was 3 of them. There was a little girl who was about 5'2", who played the stand-up bass, and they were fantastic. I mean, fantastic. They were like Peter, Paul, and Mary, and every night that place would be packed. I mean, just packed. And a lot of times they'd be out the door, down through the covered bridge, which preceded the, and it was amazing.
So when you say like Peter, Paul, and Mary, you mean like really intricate harmonies?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
And they were from Colorado, and we hired them, for the weekend, and we ended up hiring them for the rest of the season. And it was delightful. I mean, it was everything you wanted to do. I would get up on the microphone and say, please, 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 no talking during the show. I said, this is a very incredible group that you're going to love, but if you're making conversation, it's going to could detract from their presentation. And people pretty much listened, which is amazing.
So it was a true club.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And upstairs was a true dining room. Like upstairs, I would be the maitre d', see them, give them their
Right.
menus and all that stuff. So I did that for a couple years, I guess, and then where did I go from there? I left there and I went to the Sugar Bush Inn, and I was the bartender in the there was a small bar upstairs. And then the new general manager, sort of was watching me working and all this stuff. He said, "You're going to be our new sales manager." I said, "Oh, no, I'm not." I said, "I had that course. I'm not doing that one again." Anyway, they offered me, this is back then, they offered me starting salary of $20,000, 20% of all the sales, of IBM or whoever was coming up, 20% of whatever was billed to them. So it was a lot of money. I'm going like, wow, this is unbelievable. So anyway, I did that for a while. I can't remember how many years, but all of a sudden, Jimmy Connolly, who was half owner of the Bluetooth with Tom's Stores, he said to me that Tom wanted to get out, and he was willing to sell his portion of the tooth for $15,000, and I could pay him on a monthly basis, and I would be the new co-owner. So that's what I did.
Now, were you there? I know you gave me an article that was done by the Boston Globe.
Yes.
Just about you, and they proclaimed you the king of the ski bumps.
Yeah, that was silly.
And that was early days, because there's a whole nother wave of ski bumps that come in the 70s.
Yeah.
But you were full throttle here in 65.
Yeah.
And that was pretty early.
Yeah.
When they did that article, was it at the Bluetooth?
Boy, I don't remember. No, I don't think it was. I don't think it was.
Because you're smoking a cigar and you're dancing.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I was doing it all. Oh yeah, it was pretty amazing. I'm trying to think back to, those days, and yeah, I think I handled all the money, and Jimmy did the promotion and the hiring of bands, although I'd help him along.
Right.
And
Because you're a huge music fan.
yes.
And you still are.
Oh yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for this turn that has captured my attention.
Yeah.
So you're making money. You came with some savings.
Yeah.
You've got some good jobs. You're
Yeah.
having the time of your life.
Yeah.
When did you start turning toward photography and filmmaking?
Well, that was
Check the time.
after. What was it? Oh, this one year we went. A bunch of us went on a ski adventure. At the end of the skiing season, we went out to the West Coast, and one guy had a house out. His parents had a house out there, so there was about 5 of us, I guess, and we were skiing Mammoth Mountain.
Oh, so you were in California.
We were in California, yeah. And then from there, we decided we were going to Mexico, and so we drove down to Mexico through. I don't know. There's a town on the border that's kind of
Tijuana, right?
yeah.
Right.
So anyway,
Down to the Baja.
yeah. Well, actually, we went down Baja.
Yeah.
We were down Baja, and then we took a boat across to where we were actually in Mexico. And at this one place, we were camping on the beach, and it was really expensive, 50 cents a night. And they wanted their money on time, 50 cents a night. So there was a campground, and then if you walked across the street, there was these rocks, that went out into the ocean.
Yeah.
And at the end of those rocks was a bar. So we'd go across the street, and we'd come back later at night and stuff like that. And
So you must have been camping right on the Sea of Cortez.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How cool was that?
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
So at one point, well, there was a couple kind of funny stories down there. One was that was when skateboards just finally came out and all that stuff, and we brought our skateboards with us. So we went into town, and there was this one street that was like that, and we were, skateboarding down there, and the Mexican kids loved it. Hey, can we take a ride? We take a ride. So, so they'd get on the board and they'd start going down, and you picked up speed very fast. Yeah. So they'd get a little scared and they'd step off their skateboard. They took one step, boom, up in the air, at least 10 feet. I mean, They just go wham, and I don't know why they weren't killed. I swear to God, I had no idea. But anyway, they loved us, and so we had like 5 guys for a softball team. So we'd play the local kids, and they'd lend us a couple guys, and we'd have a great time. And so John Allery, who was crazy, he was literally a little crazy, and so we were standing, and there was a cliff diving place where they'd have couple guys climb way up on the top of this thing, and we're waiting, and of course they're collecting money, waiting to get the most money and then dive off. And next thing you know, we see this figure climbing up the rocks. It was Allery. I'm tired of waiting for these guys. I'm going to do it myself. He jumps off the thing, no problem, and He was pretty amazing guy. And we played softball and all that stuff, and eventually we made our way, back to Sugarbush. Now I'm trying to think of what I did.
I'm trying to tie you into the photography.
Oh, okay.
You took us to Mexico. I love it. Were you taking pictures then?
Yeah, but not quite as. Actually, when I first started taking pictures, A guy lent me his Nikon camera with a 135 lens on it.
Uh-huh.
He said, yeah, use it as long as you like. So I bought a bunch of film and I started taking pictures. So you're supposed to write down, what the things were on the camera, what kind of exposure you were using, all that stuff.
Right.
I don't need that stuff. So I must have taken, I don't know, 200, 300, maybe 1,000 pictures, which I threw out because they were terrible. They were terrible. So at some point when I still had the tooth, we started with the Academy Awards. And that was a party at the end of the season where everybody dressed up. All the girls were dressed in gowns, and then we'd have different categories. We'd have, the girl with the biggest breasts.
You could do stuff like that then.
Oh yeah.
You'd never get away with that today.
Yeah, well, they loved it. And then we had the Sneaker Full of Shit award, which was given to the appropriate guy, and they go through all this stuff. And actually, that was my first year in Sugarbush. That was in 64, 65.
So you got to clarify. So you weren't watching the Academy Awards. You were creating your own Academy Awards.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Academy was the Valley, as you knew it.
Exactly. So everybody would be there, and everybody would, have a couple of cocktails, and it was a great party. So who ends up winning the Ski Bum of the Year?
I'm assuming.
Me. I went. I mean, it was like being in a movie. I mean, I had no idea. I was there for, a couple months, but, I didn't do anything. I mean, I worked and all that stuff. And I just couldn't believe it. All of a sudden I went like, wow, this is what it's like to be a Hollywood star, like all of a sudden, like you are the man, oh my God. So I don't know.
And that is how that Boston Globe article paints you.
Yeah.
The writer was very taken with the culture in a sense that you were helping to create.
Yeah. Well, I still get today where people come up to me and say, you're amazing, and I go, what? I said, I'm not amazing.
Because you were just living your life.
That's what I was doing. And it's amazing, guys and girls and stuff like that, will be out having a couple cocktails or something, and they would say that was the best night I've ever had in here. I never realized it before, and I went, wait, I had nothing to do with it. We were just having a good time, and I appreciate what you're saying because it means a lot to me, but at the same time, I don't think I deserve what you're telling me.
Right.
So anyway, I got this camera, and I was doing that type of stuff. And I wasn't really getting anywhere, but I was having a great time because I'd be out walking or hiking or taking pictures and all that stuff. So I was going with a girl at the time called Katie Ward, and she was about 18 or 19, and I was, I don't know. And we ended up, living together. Her father was Holly Ward, who was a very big name in the Valley, really nice guy, horseman and all that stuff. And they used to have the hounds and all that stuff on a Saturday afternoon. They'd have everybody would dress up, and they'd have what do they call it? Huh?
The fox hunt?
Fox hunt, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize he was part of that.
Yeah. And she was part of it too, because she was a great writer.
So we should pause for a minute and tell the listeners that there was an official fox hunt here.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Because there are a lot of equestrians that came and settled here.
Yeah. And, and a lot of riding in the Valley when the other things weren't happening. And so actually Katie was Holly's daughter and stuff like that. So I decided I was going to photograph the fox hunt. And I did. And I think I put together a show. And the guy who ran the fox hunt was, oh God, I can't remember his name. But his father was one of the guys that invented IBM.
Mm-hmm.
So he was flush. It was flush. And I blew them away. I mean, they sat there and watched, and they were all in the show, So,
Yeah.
So they were really impressed.
Were you impressed with yourself? I mean, did you realize you had that talent?
No,
Not until that moment.
Not
right?
at all. Not at all. I didn't even know it when I did that, And oh God, it's runs back and forth, And what happened then?
So you created your first show.
Yeah, first show.
It was the fox hunt.
Yeah, and then I did this show.
Oh, okay. So this is what Charlie's describing to us as an early request by Sugarbush.
No, they didn't request anything. I told them that this is what I was doing, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'd love to see that," and we did it. And they loved it. They really loved it.
What year was that? Can you remember?
Oh God, I don't remember. It was like I did the 35th, the 45th, and the 50th reunion or whatever.
Anniversaries.
Yeah, anniversaries. Yeah. And each of them was so different, because when Stein came, in the meantime, somewhere in that beginning, Stein Erikson signed up to be the head of the ski school. And, he had the big name, and he was a great skier. And so I think he ran it for about one year, and then he moved to Colorado. And Damon had signed him up to a long-term contract. And
Damon Gadd.
Yeah, and let him do it. Let him go. And that's when Siggy came. So there was this woman, Siggy was, walking around being head of the ski school. And this woman comes up and says, "You the new head of the ski school?" He says, "Yes." He says, she says, "Do you do flips?" He says, "Yes, but never on purpose."
That's great. That is very funny, but never on purpose.
And I've got that on film, but I don't think it's in this.
Yeah.
It's in this one, but that still makes me laugh. And anyway, I started doing these things, and then I got involved in. I think it was the 1980 Winter Olympics. We were hired by I don't know, some ski company. I can't remember, but it was myself, Sparky Potter, Peggy Potter, Rush Rushworth, and so we had another guy, a friend of ours, who was who owned one of the rock and roll places. So he hired us to do a show. We did the same show every night. And people loved it.
So let's, again, bring the listeners up to speed. So Charlie was a very early presence here, a ski bum.
Yeah.
But then in the early 70s, others started to come. A lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
And two of them were Sparky and Peggy Potter.
Yeah.
And you became friends with them very quickly.
Exactly. Well, actually, Sparky was working for us at the Bluetooth.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And it was only 1 year because, during Dimes, there was very little tipping going on.
Yeah.
And so he really wasn't making. But then he discovered his wood-burning talents and stuff like that. And, now he's one of the top guys in the industry making signs.
Wood and wood.
Yeah, wood and wood. And, he's extremely, just really talented and hired a bunch of people to, carry out all his tasks and stuff like that. Anyway.
But when Dream On was formed.
Yeah.
So it's you and Peg and Spark. And what was the division of labor? Who did what?
we all did everything, although I would say Sparky probably did the major part of it because we were located at his house. So we all had to go down there and, we'd have meetings, or at the time it was all slides.
Yeah.
So we'd have these big boards that were like about that big next to each other, right? And then there's little slots. And so you can put the slides here and here and here and here. So when we put it all together, it all meshed together. And you could always move the slides around or take this board and move it here and all this other stuff. But we had 2 slide projectors and a multiple, what do you call it, multiple, anyway, you could change the slides like that, or you could take from today till tomorrow, and they were backed by music. And the combination of the music and the pictures was unreal. Because what our idea was to take people out of their seats and into our vision.
Yeah.
So you'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden, like, you would be up on a screen. And it was very, very effective, very effective. And the fact that most people weren't doing anything like that. In fact, if we would have gotten into that, well, we got into some ends of that business, but as a matter of fact, after we did the Olympics and we were covering the U.S. hockey team, and as you know, they beat the Russians that year, and actually we were given passes to go to anything we wanted to. So it was a dream come true.
Your creations were noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that ended up, going into different kinds of things, different projects. We ended up doing a show for Norwegian American Lines, which was a five-star cruise line, and going to the Mediterranean, not to the Mediterranean, but down to the islands, St. John, St. Croix, and all those places. And so the girl that was the photographer on the cruise ship said to me, "Would you like to go on another cruise?" And I said, "Yeah, let me know, give me a call." So she calls me one day. She says, "We're going to the Mediterranean. Would you like to go along?" I went like, "Oh my God."
Oh, that's so fun. I'm just watching the time. I want to talk about something, because I have to keep looking at the clock, because when I talk to you especially, I lose track of time. As you know, we've had many long conversations. Charlie, something is really special about you in terms of the work I've been trying to do. Mm-hmm. When I wanted to create Take Me Back, an anecdotal history of the Mad River Valley, it was a fundraising tool. Yeah. And we're almost sold out,
Really?
We made a lot of money. I'll tell you more later.
All right.
And we're going to use that money to showcase the history of the Mad River Valley and to help others showcase. Mm. And you were all in from the get-go. Mm. But what is different about you is that most people who came as ski bums and can tell that story don't want to, because the 60s and 70s were really wild times.
Oh, really were.
There were no drunk driving laws. There was more than one disco in the valley. I mean, there were clubs everywhere. Music, drinking, drug use, naked people in the river.
don't remind me of that.
Yeah, we actually had in the book, Charlie and I hit a bump because there was we won't name any names, but this is the beauty of you. You own that period of your life. You celebrate it. Yeah. You loved being young and experiencing something that the country was going through. The whole country was changing. Mm. Am I right?
I guess so.
And what I get from others is this resistance. Well, I'm a mother now. I'm a grandmother now. I don't really want people to know. Yeah. So just talk about that time. You do celebrate it. Why? What was happening? Whew. For you, in your life, why did you enjoy it so very much?
Well, you got up maybe at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. You were in the mountain by 10 o'clock. You had a bunch of people that you skied with every day. You know, some people dropped in, some people dropped out, but it's basically at least 5 or 7 of us who were skiing. And some of them were incredibly good skiers, and others were mediocre but learned to be a better skier than they were before. And it was just the most exciting time that you've ever lived through in your life. Like, we used to have a little competition between Stowe and Sugarbush. So one time we'd have a party and we'd have a skiing contest. And one time we'd go to Stowe and ski up there and have this competition. Other times they would come down here and we'd have it down here. So they always won the skiing part, but we always won the party. We always won the party, hands down. And it was very interesting because we got to meet some of the girls from Stowe, and we became, pretty close with a lot of different people. So we were not only, getting good reviews, we were also in Stowe. They knew who we were. I mean, before the races would start, we'd go to the bar and have about 5 tequilas. and then, you would start skiing, and the next thing, the turn was here, and we would just go, whew. So it was very quick. Our runs were very quick because we got disqualified right away,
early,
so we can get back to the bar. But that was it. And then, I don't know, over the years, it was just more beautiful, and like, I had thought of Sugarbush as being a ski area, but when I got to spend the first summer up here, boy, was I surprised. I mean, it was amazing. You would, you go to the river and you just take off your clothes and jump in the river. And the Warren Falls, I would say at least 50% were naked. And not even close to what the number of people that go there now. I mean, that place should be either shut down or just be more careful of the roads and the cars that are coming by, because somebody could get killed down there very easily. You open your car door, boom, So, unfortunately, it came to the point where I never go down there anymore. And I know there's a lot of people that, were part of our group and stuff like that. None of them go there anymore. There was all, people that come up for the weekend or something like that.
So what you've described today and other times too is a valley that was still pristine. You could enjoy the outdoors in a way you never had before.
Yeah.
And yet you had music, you had clubs to go to, you had others were transplants like you.
Yeah.
You had plenty of friendship and you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Do you mind me? I didn't ask your permission to ask this question, but I know you had a birthday.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to say how old you are.
I will be 88 years old November 18th, 2023, which, I mean, I thought I was going to die when I was 40. I got a little bit extra in there somehow. I mean, I don't feel like I'm 80. I don't feel like I'm 70. I don't feel like I'm 60. I feel like I'm 50. I'm probably between 50 and 60, in my mind.
Well, I think it's because if anybody enjoys life more than you, I don't know who it is. I think you really intentionally enjoy life moment by moment.
Yeah.
That's my observation.
Well, that's a nice observation. But I wish it was that simple. Believe me, I had stuff happening to me that you went, oh my God, I shouldn't be doing that. But anyway.
Well, let's finish up on that high note.
Okay.
It's so good to see you today. Thank you for coming for episode 14 of Take Me Back, the interviews. I am so grateful that Charlie Brown came today. Thank you.
My pleasure.